Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have David Jenyns join us. David, welcome.
Fantastic. Pleasure to be here.
So David, you've been a consultant, advisor. You've provided done-for-you services to clients in the areas of video production, SEO services, and systems and processes. You started your SEO business, I believe, back in 2008. Can you tell us, how did you get into that business?
Yeah, so my business just prior to that, I was kind of like the marketing guy in a partnership where my partner and I, we created some courses around trading the stock market. And here in Australia, they had some changes in the financial law around what financial advice you could give and what you couldn't. That ended up basically my business partner headed in one direction, I headed in the other direction. I'd built up the marketing team, so I had a good number of team members around me, and I thought, okay, well, what are we going to do now? We've developed these skills and ways that we do things for ranking. It was kind of in the heyday of search engine optimization. And I thought, well, let's just start up a digital agency. Let's take what we were applying in a very competitive space, the stock market education space, and then how do we apply that through to small business? And we got some really great results in that space. And yeah, it ended up being actually a little bit earlier than you mentioned from earlier than 2008. I'd probably say, because I've been in that or owned that business for probably about 13, 14 years now. And I probably worked heavily in it for about 10 or 11 of those years before I kind of stepped out of the operations.
Got it. I think I was going off of your LinkedIn profile there. So I don't know if that's the right number or not, but somewhere around there. So yeah, that makes sense. You developed this skill set as you were running this other business around the stock market and trading, right? Kind of getting ranked, helping that content to be more visible and to comp in the rankings. And then decided, okay, let's just leverage essentially the skill set that we've developed and create a new business around it, which became melbourneseoservices.com, correct?
Exactly.
And so how do you then go about getting your first clients? Like, you have the skills, you have the idea, but how do you then actually start to build that business?
Yeah, firstly, we focused in on just search engine optimization, and I had a few sort of colleagues and people that I had worked with and people who'd seen my work. So that was a big part of where I got my first few initial clients. And then I was quite deliberate in selecting the domain name, Melbourne SEO Services. So it had core keyword really that I wanted to rank for in there. And yes, we had to do a bit of work to get it to rank, but we did very quickly, both in the local search and organic search, get some good visibility, and we got good lead flow from that way. So it started off with SEO, but then as the online landscape has developed, we've started to realize that we needed to master multiple different channels. And, we brought things like AdWords into the fold. Running some Google ads had also done lead generation for us. And then once we started to get a few wins, collecting case studies and testimonials, that's a big thing very early as we were starting to build up. I focused on, I was actually doing a lot of the work initially. I was working with clients. I had some team members supporting me, but I was delivering the work to make sure we got a really great result for them, collected the testimonial and case study, looked for referrals, and then it kind of just started to grow from there very organically. There's a bit of word of mouth, a bit of SEO. We then started to also double down on YouTube traffic. YouTube's pretty crowded now, but if you go back sort of that 10 years ago, we were taking video content that I'd created from workshops and things like that, chopping them up into little pieces, optimizing them, and then loading them onto my YouTube channel. And a lot of people were discovering just little snippets, little how to solve problems that they were having. And then that would lead them back to our website. They'd want to find out more. We'd get them into our funnel. We'd kind of warm them up over a period of time just through autoresponder sequences and sending out valuable content, occasionally making offers for them to kind of take that next step, and it kind of grew from there.
Right. There's a lot that you just shared there. I want to kind of go back and unpack a little bit of that. You mentioned that you had already a bit of a network, people that were familiar with your work at the stock trading business. Was it just a matter, did you just send them emails? Did you pick up the phone and call them? How did you introduce them to what you were planning to do or had just started doing with a new SEO business?
Yeah, it was just emails. So once we kind of started to head in different directions with my business partner and I just contacted some of the different colleagues and said, hey, here's what I'm working on right now. Send them an email from the new domain name. So they could then check out the website and have a little bit of a look around. Had some success in that, a very competitive space. So it did mean also when we started to work with some of these small businesses, when we were talking about local SEO, which as again, going back 10 years ago, we're still very early days in the local SEO, not overly competitive. You didn't need to do a huge amount to rank well for very specific geographic terms, suburbs and things like that. So that was a big part of it where I could clearly say I could get a very good ROI on their marketing dollar. Like you give me $1 and I could turn it into $3 or $4 just by picking up some local rankings and getting them some quick wins.
And how do you compare what's working best for you now to back then? So you shared some of the YouTube stuff, just the local rankings. There's been a lot of changes, right, in the SEO landscape. Maybe getting ranked isn't as easy as it used to be, a lot more competition. So when you look at even the SEO business that you have today or some of the other businesses that you've been involved in, what's working best right now that you're seeing yourself or for clients that you're helping in terms of lead generation?
Yeah, we do a lot of leading with content first these days. So we have a particular method that we like that ticks quite a few boxes. So oftentimes we'll work with a client, or even if it's something that we do where we'll batch a lot of content creation in one day. So we love running little workshops on the particular subject matter for the client, recording all of that content, and that almost becomes the seed of the next 6 to 12 months worth of content. We'll take the content, we'll chop it up into little pieces. Those will go to YouTube, will get optimized. We'll get those.
Sorry, David, just to jump in, but is that, when you say kind of like a little workshop, is that a live workshop they're presenting to clients? You're just capturing video, audio at that time. You're creating transcripts. You're using the videos. You're using the audios.
Turning them into articles. Yep, exactly right. And then creating derivative work. We try and throw quite a lot of content out into the world, and then we see what sticks. Some pieces of content will rise up and we'll go, oh, this YouTube video for some reason has 10 times the amount of views compared to these other 30 videos that we have that were all published at a very similar time. Right. Okay, well, let's now double down on that. What can we do to amplify it? What can we do to repurpose it? Maybe we can turn it into a longer form article that ends up appearing on the blog. So yeah, it's a live workshop, and sometimes it's easier for some clients than others, depends on the industry. So for example, we did some work with Cosmetic Institute here in Victoria, and they got some of the doctors to sit inside the practices. They invited a few clients along, and they talked about some of the considerations you should have before having a procedure. I worked with a software company, and the software company talked about how to validate a software project before you get started. And they got a couple of guest speakers in that talked about things like raising money and a few area topics like that. And what we were able to do is take the content, chop it up into little pieces, and then we started to see what resonated well with that target audience to basically drive some of this organic traffic in. And then we'd obviously have the website with a lot of call to actions, which would then get them into the funnel.
So I'm thinking about a lot of consultants who understand the value of content, and they're writing articles, or maybe they're deciding to start a podcast, or they're putting out videos. But there's a lot of people out there who don't actually see success from their content. Yeah. There's no real strategy behind it, or it's hard for them to stay consistent with it. Or even if they are, they may not see the return that they'd like for many months or even well over a year. In your experience, is there something that people can do to accelerate their success with content?
Yep. The only way to really accelerate beyond that is to pay. You pay for exposure. So your content has to be good either way for it to work, because you need to, content is about getting it in front of the audience to get their attention, and the content needs to be good enough that it holds their attention. From there, we can build up some trust. Once we've got some trust, then we can start to really get them to engage and redirect their attention to the offer or to consume more or whatever it may be. So it starts with having the good content. The next piece after that is, if you want to accelerate paying to play effectively, definitely Facebook these days, you've got to be boosting content for it to get good exposure, particularly if we're talking about pages. You can get some okay exposure still through your personal profile, but it's getting very noisy on there. And I'm finding even the same these days with LinkedIn. Initially, LinkedIn, you could post a bit of content and you could get some good exposure and some good reach, which you still can, but because it's getting more and more crowded, more videos are coming on, more content, everybody saw that as the low-hanging fruit. Now what we're seeing happening is you need to get the content engaged early for it to get any real traction. So it's emailing out your database and getting them to comment on it and engage with it from when it first goes live. That then kicks in the LinkedIn algorithm and then pushes it and gets it even further reach. Probably the next step beyond that at some point, but LinkedIn's paid options are still pretty average pay-per-click options in LinkedIn. It's very expensive. But if they get that right, that would be the next thing to look at. How do you pay to increase that exposure? So,
right. So really to break that down, what I'm hearing you say is like you're putting different content out there, even organically, right, without paying. You're seeing where are you getting more engagement, right? Where are things kind of higher levels of response? And then based on what's working, that would then be something that would be worthwhile for someone to consider putting some money towards to boost that content, to essentially get it in front of more eyeballs that are targeted specifically to ideal client.
Yeah. And for us these days, like we used to be able to focus on one particular strategy, whereas now we have to hit things from multiple different angles. Like it's very hard for just in the content game. If you're going to try and lead with content, just doing one channel is not going to be enough. You've got to LinkedIn, Facebook, organic SEO. You need to be emailing your database. You need to think
retargeting,
YouTube,
all that kind of stuff.
Retargeting. You got to squish as much out of it to get the ROI with content, whereas you didn't used to need to do that. That's also why, depending on the size of the business as well, we sometimes suggest leading with paid strategies first, because you can turn it on and you can get some great traffic. Depends on the business though. Certain businesses, if it's a service-based business and they're in a particular geographic region, you can sometimes make AdWords work straight out of the gate just because you're targeting very specific areas. You can also get local SEO. That's another way to get some quick wins. You kind of have to pick it based on the business, what the competition level is, how much they're happy to spend to acquire a lead. Like if you're a brand new startup, really all you're doing and you haven't figured out your numbers, when you're creating content, you're exchanging your time for creating that content to try and get that awareness. It's not free because you're exchanging the time. If you're a bit more established, you don't have to exchange the time, but you have to exchange money for that attention.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be exchanging money unless you understand your business very well, because you might just spend a whole bunch of cash but not see the ROI on it, or understand your numbers, or understand how much you'd be happy to spend to acquire that lead.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. We see this a lot with different entrepreneurs or consultants who have this idea of, okay, I'm going to invest into ads. They're not really committed to it. And what I mean by that is they'll think that they can get a result very quickly just because they're investing money into it. But in many cases, right, it can take several months to really test things, get them ironed out, figure out what's working, optimize it. And then once you do, then it can really take off and you can see great returns. But you need to be prepared for it to take a period of time for things to get dialed in. And for many entrepreneurs, they're conservative or they're looking for quicker wins. But that's the challenge for people with paid. So I always say to people, like, if you're going to go on the paid route, you have to be prepared to make an investment and stick with it for a little bit to get the actual returns. So for many people, it's not the best place to start because there's other things they could be doing in with a more direct approach. David, I want to just ask you though, so you mentioned also that in the business at the beginning, you were doing pretty much everything yourself. How did you make the transition to start adding on team members? How did you move yourself, especially from the point of view of clients? They think of David, the SEO guy, he's the expert. We're hiring him. We want him. We don't want other people doing this. What did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely slow. As I said, I was probably trapped in the business for about 10 years. I look back now and I think I could have transitioned out much quicker than I did with what I know. But at the time, you just kind of do little baby steps. Like you'd start off doing some outsourcing first or out tasking to pass off certain jobs. But I was still the touch point for the clients, but I was getting some of the back end work done. Then we started to get more of a part-time and full-time roles pop up where it was more an administrative type person who helped with a lot of the communication and lining things up. Then more team members kept on getting added in to solve some of those different problems. And the most challenging and kind of addresses what you were talking about was removing me from the equation. We did a few key things. One, we set up an email where it was support@melbourneseoservices.com. And we started to stop using my email as that contact point. And I would tell clients as well, if you want a quicker response, because I am the bottleneck, if you're sending it to me, it will be delayed. And more than likely, I'm just going to forward it on anyway. The quickest response will be to go to support@. If they require me, they will loop me in. So that was a big one, kind of started stepping in there. The next thing was as well, even though I'm still heavily branded on the site in a lot of the videos and things like that, I did end up hiring a lady, Melissa, who's our CEO. So she now handles a lot of the operations, and she ends up being the first touch point for when the lead comes in. So she might refer some of the higher ones to me, or if there's something a bit more boutique or something a bit more particular, but generally speaking, she'll be the first touch point. And then she's also very good at setting the standards and setting up expectations. Once they're onboarded, again, they're going through to the support at their customer support. And I've now transitioned to almost like last line of defense.
What was that like for you to transition from being like the guy, the brand, all that, to now actually really removing yourself, like making the investment also to bring in someone senior to essentially run the business? I mean, I'm guessing that was not inexpensive, right? There was probably a significant investment involved in that, but just walk us through, like, what was the driver for you to do that? And then from an investment perspective, like, what did that look like? Was it a big investment? Take us through that a little bit.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Definitely a big step to let go. The big driver was we found out we were pregnant with our first child. I was still doing the 70-hour, 80-hour work weeks, and I thought, I don't want to be the dad who's always too busy, always working. You know, sure, I was at home a lot, but I was always thinking and doing work in the evenings, on the weekends and things like that. So that was the big driver. I thought, I got to do something different here. And that kind of set me on a little bit of a process of this idea of systemization. And I had a lot of baggage around, I wasn't able to systemize what we were doing because I was the guy. And I thought Google kept on updating its algorithms. So how could I write a system for something that would be out of date next week? I just tested a lot of those assumptions by going, well, maybe I can systemize. What does that look like? Yeah. And then kind of started on that process. And then the lady that took over, I was quite fortunate in that she was already involved in the business and I elevated her up. I think if you went externally, it would be a very expensive position to recruit for. Right. Whereas she was kind of there. I just started to let go of the reins, realized that we gave her a pay bump. And then I was happy with taking a little bit of a pay cut if it meant that it wasn't using as, because effectively I'd bought back more of my time. Right. And that did happen at the start. But then what I found is she was also a good operator to start to realize things like, hey, this particular product line we should cut, because even though it brings in a good chunk of revenue, it also is our biggest source of expenses. So we're not really making much profit on this. Right. So then she started to get very particular with what it was that we were actually delivering. And I watched some revenues dip, but I saw profits start to increase. And I started to see the bank and the cash balances all starting to increase, had a longer runway, and we were putting aside the money for the taxes, and we were pre-planning for the end of the year when, we shut down for 12 months and not 12 months, sorry, a few weeks in the 12th month, in December when we'd shut down, and making sure that wages were covered over that period of time. She started doing a lot of things like that where I just started to realize, hang on, maybe I'm not as special as I thought I was.
What opened your mind to that? Like, how did you expand beyond? Because I think a lot of people have the same challenge where they really feel that the business is them, that the client wants them, that someone else can't do it. They're the expert. They're bringing what's unique. And that holds them back from freeing themselves, from creating more leverage, from building, even if it's not a full-time team, bringing in the resources and delegating stuff. So what was it? Did you read a book? Did you listen to some podcasts? Did you have a conversation with someone? What kind of got you to think, like, what was it, the turning point for you, got you to see, yeah, maybe I don't actually need to do all this myself?
Yeah, definitely the moment of finding out that we were going to be pregnant was enough to go, I need to look. Then started to have in my head, well, I can see other people doing this. I know other people have built up agencies that work without them. So it's possible.
Right.
And then I started to realize, in my eyes, the business was broken if it relied solely on me. So I needed to re-engineer the products and services that we were delivering if I couldn't deliver them without me involved. So we started rebuilding things like our SEO starter pack, which is kind of like where people get started. Initially, we were doing these elaborate, very in-depth SEO reports, fully kind of picking apart everything. And then now we started to rely on, SEM Rush and some of those tools and some additional things over the top. And probably the audits prior to doing that were higher quality, in that is very custom, very bespoke. But the difference between maybe 80% and 100%, the client wasn't noticing. Like, I've not had any
value, right? Even though it's not as detailed and customized, there's still enough value for them. And most clients they're not even going to implement on everything that you would offer them anyways, right? So it's still working out.
I started consuming all of the info, like reading the books, like Scaling Up and Traction and Work the System and the E-Myth, and trying to just get my head around and understand what it takes to build a business that isn't dependent on the business owner.
Right.
Starting off with things that I knew that could very easily be delegated. Finances, some of the management of the team, some of the administration through to clients. Like, that was the other thing. Systemize everything else except for the hardest bit. If there's really a roadblock for you that I can't let go of this one thing, well, how about you let go of everything else first, and then we come back to that one thing later.
Right. And so today, how much time do you spend involved in the SEO business yourself? Like, on a weekly basis or monthly basis?
I'm about half a day a week. So kind of varies. It's mainly to do with meetings. So I have a meeting with my CEO and we look at dashboard numbers and figure out what we're doing. I have a meeting with our finance lady. That's a weekly thing, having a look at cash flow, what's come in, what's sort of forecasted, how next month is looking. We have a meeting with the marketing team as well, just to think about what are the initiatives. Usually I do that after the finance meeting, so that way the financial position informs the actions that we end up taking. Yeah, that's kind of like really freed me up, and to build up the SaaS, which used to be my side project, is now my full-time gig.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that in just a moment. But before we do, how would you say your take-home pay as your income from the SEO business has changed now that you've gone from full-time, like being in it nonstop, right? That being your world, to half a day a week? Has it gone down considerably because you've now freed up a lot more time? Has it stayed the same? Has it increased? What's happened?
Because the SaaS and the Melbourne SEO, I kind of get paid as an employee, plus I end up getting profit distribution as well. So I get my pay as an employee has gone up slightly, not a huge amount, but I get paid some from the SaaS, and I effectively still get paid from some at the
SEO
digital agency as well. So my net wage I get has increased since Melissa has taken over, probably by about 25%. But then in addition to that, we're now doing, because I'm the business owner, we do quarterly profit distributions, and that's separate from the wage. I always think in terms of the wage as how much would it cost to replace me or hire someone to do that role. Yep. And then as the business owner, the profit distribution, which fluctuates, it'll depend on how the business is performing and what time of the year we're up to. Oftentimes very early in the year, after the Christmas break, when everything's gone quiet, I tend to get a smaller payout then, because we're kind of come through, and it depends on what the cash balance looks like. Whereas sort of the mid-year one is usually bigger because we're kind of right in the middle of the trading. So, but I didn't used to take profit distribution. So that's a big change. I used to funnel everything back into the business. I would be pulling my bare minimum wage out and funding the team and reinvesting. Whereas now I realize that I need to be rewarded for the work that I'm doing as well. Like it's easy for the business owner to take it all on their back and look after everybody else and make sure everybody else is paid, but then they kind of neglect themselves. That's pretty common.
And so with those profit distributions, what do you do with that? Is that going into buying boats and cars? Or are you putting it into investments and real estate? Or is it just going to family? Or is it savings? Or what are you doing with, because that's money that you previously didn't have, right?
Yep.
What are you doing with that?
A little bit of family, a little bit of savings. So most of it sort of, we have got some properties, sort of paying down debt on properties, and then doing things that I hadn't done for a long time for the wife and the family, realizing, hang on, what am I now? I'm 38 this year. Yeah. So, just little things around the house.
Nice.
Get the deck renovated, and
there you go. Yeah.
And a few things like that.
For sure. Your latest venture is System Hub, which is an online tool for SOP, standard operating procedures. Why did you make the shift from a services business to a product-based business? I know that you said it was kind of like this side project, but a lot of people just are very focused on their one business. And instead of launching something new, they just think, well, how can I just grow what I have? Why did you start that product business, and why the shift?
Yeah. Started it to solve our own problem, because we were storing systems, processes, SOPs in Dropbox, and we were doing them as Word documents, and it got very clunky because I was trying to build this systemized business, but it was just unorganized, hard for people to find things. Too many team members were able to see all of the systems. Like, I wanted team members to only see the systems that were relevant to their role.
Right.
I wanted to get the ability for people to sign and agree, and a few things like that. So we kind of developed it initially for ourselves, and then realized that it could be a product. I always see service-based business and consulting work. It's a great place to get started, work very closely with your target audience to learn and understand their problems and get a deep understanding. Service business, though, is much harder to scale, like 10x, 100x, 1000x. Imagine trying to do an SEO business where you got 1,000 times your regular client flow. The wheels would fall off almost immediately. Whereas SaaS, I found, in the product-based business, was much more scalable, where I can bolt in additional support team members. What's the difference between 1,000 members and 10,000 team members? We're probably talking a couple of support staff to handle the tickets, because we've kind of built that and systemized it. So I see it as much more scalable. I don't foresee a day where we let go of the digital agency. We did sell off part of the digital agency, was a video production company. We systemized that, and I actually sold that. We exited that part of the business. But I think the digital agency will keep, because it's a way to develop our skills. I see marketing as a core skill that I'll need regardless of what business we end up working in. I think it's a great way for me to prove that you can build a profitable business that isn't owner dependent, which is a great case study. And I can point to real life examples and show things that you can't normally show inside the SaaS.
Got it.
That's a big part of what we do as well.
So you had this idea, you needed it anyways, like internally, right? So you started to develop it. How did you then go about, because I think this is really beneficial and valuable for other consultants and people in the community here, because oftentimes, as you said, right, you see things when you're consulting and you identify opportunities that could be served with a software product or some kind of tool or whatever it might be. So how did you take it from, okay, we're using this internally to actually getting clients, getting customers into that product? How do you actually start landing, say generating revenue from that new venture?
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of things. The good thing, that agency that we owned was a marketing agency. So we built a website for it.
You ate your own dog food, right?
That's right. We did some basic search engine optimization for it to target some phrases we knew were relevant. We started to create content. So we created a podcast where we interview other subject matter experts and have them share a system or a process they use inside their business.
Yeah.
And then we turn that episode into a documented process. So that's just like systemhub.com/podcast. So we did SEO, we did podcast, we did some social stuff, do a little bit of LinkedIn stuff. And because it was the side business for a while there, I didn't feel the time pressure of this has got to perform for me to be able to put food on the table. So for a period there, and this was in the transition as I'm working out of the digital agency, effectively System Hub was robbing all of the profits from Melbourne SEO. So all of that profit distribution that I was talking about that I wasn't getting was getting funneled into the development of this software and getting it off the ground. Yeah. Then it got to a point when I did the transition with Melissa moving in. Melissa said, "Hey, Dave, you're robbing Melbourne SEO. You're stunting what it can do because you're taking all of the money and you're moving it over here." And she gave me like a line in the sand and said, at this point, it needs to start paying for itself because you've been running it as a side business for a few years. And then that's kind of when we started to make the transition. I moved over full time. We started ramping things up. We got it to a point where it could stand on its own 2 feet. And then Melbourne SEO, that's how it was able to start putting off profit because all the money wasn't getting funneled into this software project.
And where's System Hub right now? Is it profitable? Is it getting to that break-even point? Where's it at right now in its kind of lifespan?
Yeah, profitable, mainly based on the idea that I can control how much we tip into development or not.
Got it.
So the biggest expense with any sort of software project is how much development hours. Like the product is mature enough that it delivers a great result. Clients use it. They're repeating. It's all, it's a software as a service. So it's a recurring billing. They pay monthly or annually. Yeah. And we're adding new features. But that was the other thing when Melissa drew the line in the sand and said it has to stand on its own 2 feet. I used to just plow all of this money into software development because software is a never-ending bucket. It just keeps on consuming. Right. No matter if you want it to suck down money, it'll suck down as much as you'll give it.
Right. You're never satisfied with just the features and products or features that you have right now. There's always going to be new things, updates that come down the line you need to invest into. So yeah.
So now I manage it with my accounts lady where we have a look at the profit that's in the business and then how much that gives me for the next sprint. Okay, you can now invest in 80 hours, 100 development hours. Okay, next month we're doing really well. You can do 200 development hours. Okay, this month has been a little bit quieter. That said, though, I do find the SaaS business, it doesn't fluctuate as much as that as the service-based business because they're locking into recurring revenue. The lumpiness really only occurs with annual subscriptions, and sometimes if we do a promotion for an annual subscription, we get a big spike.
Right.
Or if we're running an event or something like that.
Got it. And so most of the client acquisition for System Hub has come from the podcast, from SEO. Have you ventured into any kind of direct sales yet, or is that something that you are considering?
Definitely considering. I think the direction we're probably heading. We've tested some Facebook ads. I don't quite think my audience is there. They're a bit more of a sophisticated, busy business owner. I actually think where we're going to have the best wins, because I have a couple of small wins in this space, is more strategic partnerships. So identifying the expert in a particular vertical, working with them. So we did a work with a guy who teaches video production agencies how to be better video production agencies. It just so happened because I ran a video production agency, I also had a whole bunch of our systems and processes for that business. So I worked with this gentleman where he's talking to video production agencies, and we developed some systems, processes, and training that live inside System Hub specific for that vertical. So it's easy for him to point people our way because they get extra tailored information. And I think that's probably the direction I want to head. Find the expert I'm chatting with at the moment, an accountant, a coach to accountants. And I think helping him develop some systems and processes for those accountants, and then he can basically say, hey, you should be looking at using System Hub. And I think that's probably going to be a better direction for us.
Interesting. Well, David, I really want to thank you for coming on here. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could dive into. But where can people go to learn more about you, your work, like what you're up to? What's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, look, if you head to systemhub.com/podcast, that's a great way to get started because we're just creating systems and processes and sharing them. Gets a flavor for what we do. And on that System Hub website, you'll find Twitter and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's another good one. Just probably connect through to me that way. We post a lot of good content.
Sounds good. So we're going to have all that linked up in the show notes. David, again, thanks so much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.